Hey, so you heard meditation, it's helpful for social anxiety. So you try to meditate, you do it for a day, maybe two, and then you completely fall off. You can't find the consistency and build that practice of daily meditation. In this video, I want to help you understand what's the block that's preventing that consistency for you. And I want to help you understand, I'm going to answer the question for you, is meditation even the right tool for you in terms of overcoming your social anxiety? So let's chat about this. And before we do, I just want to say welcome back if you're already part of our community. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Rubin. I'm a transformational coach, and I specialize in helping you reduce your social anxiety, own your worth, and express yourself fearlessly. If that's something you resonate with, welcome home. You're in the right place. And let's get right into our discussion here. Meditation. What is meditation? Let's just define it real quickly so we can have a discussion about it. But the very basics of it is sitting still, noticing your thoughts, and when you get drawn into them, detach from them and come back to the present moment. You're in the present moment and you're trying to breathe and focus on maybe the physical sensations of your breath, and you get lost in the thoughts again, and you're trying to let these thoughts float on by like the clouds in the sky so that you can come back to the present moment repeatedly, over and over and over again during that meditation session. Whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour, however long you're doing the meditation, that is the ultimate goal, to spend as much time in the present moment as possible. And the limitation that I see here is those thoughts, especially the ones that you can't seem to let float on by. The ones that are very busy, the ones that you're trying to quiet down your mind from, those are occurring because there's an emotion happening somatically within your body. Think of the thoughts as the smoke and your emotions are the fire underneath. It's not the most effective way to quiet down your mind by waving around your hands in the smoke, because there could be one emotion, one or two emotions happening somatically within the body, and that could lead to hundreds of thoughts. That could lead to thousands of thoughts. So when you're socially anxious and you're dealing with anxiety all the time and a heightened nervous system and you're sensing danger everywhere in your environment, that's an issue of emotional dysregulation. That's an emotional issue. Those come from emotional wounds that you've experienced in your lifetime. And I want to show you this graph here to show you exactly what I'm talking about when I say emotional regulation, because everybody is talking about this emotional regulation thing, but very few people actually understand the deep intricacies of it. Okay, and so what does it mean to regulate something? It means to maintain this optimal set point. So for example, the temperature gauge in your car, you don't want that getting too cold, you don't want it getting too hot, you want it just right. And I want to show you this graph here because this goes for your emotions as well. So on the bottom here we have emotions, and this is the important thing on the y-axis here, which is your personality. And what you will notice is that there's actually an optimal amount of emotions that you want to be feeling on a moment-to-moment basis. Why? Because the highest level of personality is when you're taking just a spoonful of your emotions. You're not feeling too much over on this way, and you're not feeling too little over this way. I'll give you an example here. If you go too far over this way, your personality is going to drop. You're not going to be able to express your true personality. Why? Because you're feeling way too much. Think about it. Your fight or flight's way too high, rapid heart rate, can't breathe. It's just way too emotionally overwhelming. Think about that. It's going to be really hard to express yourself and find your true voice and your personality when you're completely overwhelmed by those emotions. And then if you go over this way, look, your personality drops. Why? Because over on this side, you're dissociated, you're living in your head. You're completely numb and cut off from your emotions. And think about how hard it is to connect with others and be conversational and express your personality when you're completely living in your head, when you're dissociated and you're disconnected from your body. And another example is you might go way over and feel too much emotions during a conversation to the point where you're panicked, and then you kind of check out of your body and you dissociate. So you could go all the way over this way and then loop around and then come back and completely disconnect from yourself. Sometimes it's just, this is your norm over here. So even out of the social situations, this is just your norm. You're overthinking a lot, self-doubting, hesitating. This is just your norm. This is your home base over here. Okay, remember, we want the optimal set point of your emotions. Here's what I'm talking about when I talk about emotional regulation, because here's your flow state. This is when your higher self is driving the bus. This is when you have the optimal amount of emotions, because remember, you take that spoonful. So when people have that expressive personality, you'll feel it yourself. You know this. They have a bit of oomph to it. They have a bit of passion behind what they say. They have the feeling underneath their opinions. They can be bold. Why? Because they have just the right of emotions underneath what they're saying. So this is the optimal rate here. Now, when I talk about emotional regulation, let's talk about what it means to be dysregulated. So to be regulated, you're here at the set point. You're flowing, just the right amount of emotions. What does it mean to be dysregulated? Well, you get triggered, for example. You get triggered, you're in a conversation, for example, you get triggered and you start moving towards too much emotions. Or you get triggered and it's completely overwhelming, you dissociate, blank mind, you can't even, the thoughts aren't even getting processed, the words aren't getting processed, you're completely disconnected from your body, so you get triggered and you move over this way. So you've become dysregulated. And this is why I want to talk about this whole meditation thing, is because meditation serves the purpose. Meditation is a tool for when you're just ever so slightly dissociated or triggered or activated or living in that fight or flight. It's when you're just ever so slightly, you can meditate to get yourself back into the present moment. But if you're over here on the extremes, which you're watching this video because you're in the extremes, you're either dissociated or overwhelmed, and meditation is not the tool. Why? Because in the conversation itself, you're either feeling too much or feeling too little. And then what happens is you get out of the social situation and it's time for that, create that space when it's time to meditate. And when you're in that space to try to meditate, what's going to happen is your emotional system is still going to be dysregulated coming up out of that social situation. So when you're out of it, your system is still jacked up. Your nervous system is still highly activated. And what's going to be happening from that space over here? You're riddled with guilt and shame. You're just feeling so much guilt and shame and beating up on yourself. How do you know that? Because the voice in your head is beating up on you, criticizing on you. You're feeling like there's something wrong with you and defective. And so what do you do when you do that? You start consuming content that makes you actually feel worse. You escape into content that further solidifies the belief in you that there's something wrong with you. For example, I gotta find the perfect social skills. I gotta find the perfect social skills so I can have the perfect personality. And then if I can do that, I'm gonna be okay. And it provides some relief. And the other option is, yeah, I'm gonna be a high value man, like you see all over the internet these days. I'm gonna be high value. I'm gonna be part of the 1%. I'm gonna be better than everybody else. And it provides you that false relief for just for a time being, but it's an illusion. It's completely an illusion. Why? Because you watching that content is only solidifying the deep shame that you have within you. And if you go onto the other side over here, where you're completely dissociated, numb, what you're going to be doing is living in your addictions, weed, alcohol, drugs, zoning out on Netflix and TV shows and content, binge eating, porn, whatever your vice is, that's what's going to happen when you're completely dissociated coming out of the social situation. And if this is you, you're constantly flip-flopping and stuck in this cycle, flip-flopping back and forth between these extremes, I want to offer you a free masterclass. I want you to take that masterclass because in that masterclass, I'm going to show you the step-by-step process for reducing that social anxiety. So you're not wavering too far to the right, too far to the left. When you do that, you hit that flow, you're in touch with your own worth, and you can express yourself fearlessly in this set point with all of your personality behind it. Take that masterclass today and empower yourself. So going back to this graph here, you leave the conversation, your nervous system's jacked up, you're beating up on yourself, you're riddled with guilt and shame, you're feeling like you don't even want to connect with anymore, you're embarrassed, you're humiliated, you're starting to isolate. That is not a time to meditate with this soft little tool here to try to get you back into the present moment. This is time for harm reduction. Harm reduction. This is about being absolutely gentle with yourself and having compassion for yourself and forgiving yourself for having that type of interaction in the first place. Maybe you hardened yourself, you made some mistakes, you didn't socialize in the way you wanted to, you didn't express yourself in the way you wanted to. It's time to start moving towards forgiveness, self-forgiveness, okay? How do you do that? What is a more gentle way? Because the important thing is you have to manage these swings. They're just as important to manage the swings because in these extremes, you already believe there's something wrong with you. You already have that feeling like there's something defective about you. And in these extremes, you're going to be acting in ways that confirm those beliefs. You're going to be acting in shameful ways, being in an addiction, completely isolating from people, binge eating, porn, doing things that don't actually move you towards the bigger vision of your life. Creates more shame. Watching content, for example, that gives you this illusion that you're some gonna day, this one day you're gonna have this amazing charismatic personality. Studying, for example, I used to do this, study movie scenes for how to respond to people. That is a fantasy. We don't live in Disneyland, we live in real life. It's an acting scene. Okay, trying to be high value, for example. Okay, that is not reality. And so what we have to do, if you're over on this side, instead of consuming that type of content, I would get off the content completely, but if you have to, it should be a book that teaches you timeless principles. I would recommend spiritual principles, okay, or some kind of personal development that teaches you, that ingrains into you principles that are going to help you deepen your relationship with yourself, help you connect with your higher self, and how to expand from that place into the world. So careful of the content that you consume. The most powerful thing hands down that you can do for that harm reduction is when you get triggered and you're living in the extremes, share it. Find somebody safe in your life, share about exactly what happened, the exact nature of what happened within the social situation. I was in a social situation, I had this thought coming into my head that, I kept thinking of what to say next, and you know what? I think the other person thought I was weird. I feel like I just rubbed them the wrong way. Now I'm feeling completely ashamed and guilty about it. I have these feelings like there's just something wrong with me. Share your truth with somebody safe. And you might be saying, well, I don't have anybody like that. Who am I going to talk to about this stuff? Well, problem number one, I want you to start moving towards that. Start thinking of is there somebody in my life, or what are some spaces out there that I can get to where I can start searching for people where I can share vulnerably and honestly. Okay, harm reduction. So when you share it out, when you go, for example, instead of losing yourself in addictions, you go for walks in nature, you be in nature. Just some ideas for you. And then you start, instead of consuming content that re-ingrains the fact that there's something wrong with you, And it's a disguise for how to improve yourself, but really what's happening underneath is it's shaming you. And let's say you transform that and you start leaning into more nurturing books that are helping you forgive yourself, for example, not be so hard on yourself, deepen your relationship with yourself, how to have more authentic relationships with other people, for example, how to define your own success instead of chasing the success that other people define for you. When you do that, that's going to help you come back to the center. In other words, come back to yourself. So is meditation the right tool for you? I'll give you an example here, because meditation for me, I don't see the point of doing, this is my belief, I don't see the point of doing long stretches of an hour-long meditations, even half an hour meditations, where I'm just sitting there looking at my breath and sitting there looking at my thoughts. Because ultimately, when you get to this flow state, the reason I say that is because when you get to the flow state, it's time to take action. So when you regulate your emotions back to center, you find your higher self again. It's time to take action from that place, because without action, the way your system's configured here, the way your triggers are configured, they're never going to change. So you have to get into the one-on-one conversations. You have to do the public speaking. You have to do the presentations at work. You have to call people and share vulnerably and deepen your connections with them. And you have to go and spend time with them. Otherwise, this system's not going to change. Your triggers are going to stay in place. Here's one other thing to consider is that you know now that like we talked about, when the trigger stays in place, you get dysregulated to the right or to the left. There is nothing more effective than healing your triggers than taking the action. Taking the action to get into the conversation. That's the most effective way. But the thing you got to consider is, can you get into a conversation to the point where you're comfortable enough where you're not going to go too far to the right and too far to the left, to the point where it's going to be somewhat traumatic for you? So you have to figure out for yourself, do you work on the trigger or do you take the action? Action's the by far the most effective, like we talked about, but you run the risk if you get triggered and it's too overwhelming, that becomes yet another traumatic experience that you're gonna have to work through. So you do have to be very careful here. Sometimes, especially within our program, Trigger Free, as we work specifically on the triggers, about 80%. Because we want to reduce the emotional overwhelm over here. We want to reduce the dissociation over here so that the conversation is not so overwhelming. And then there's not so much avoidance around getting into the conversations. You can stay longer in the conversations. You can show more personality within the conversations. And when that happens, you have positive experiences and you start to build up a positive reference library of positive experiences rather than building up, for example, taking action, and everything's humiliating, everything's embarrassing. I think I rubbed that person the wrong way. That person doesn't like me anymore. Now I got to avoid them. And when you keep doing it that way, when you keep pushing forward in that way without considering your emotional regulation, you keep building the negative references of negative and traumatic and painful, embarrassing references. So you have to be very careful here of what the balance is for you. Okay, so to bring this home here, you can meditate a little bit. There's nothing wrong with a little meditation. Nothing wrong with taking 3 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day to at least breathe a little bit and take care of yourself. If you're not doing that, at least commit to that, please. But if you're at the point where your nervous system is completely dysregulated and you can't find your flow state, you can't find your true personality, remember, it's about harm reduction outside of the social situations And then it's about working on your specific triggers and finding your balance between action and working to heal your triggers. So perhaps there's not so much resistance as you're taking the action. The action doesn't feel like so much torture, and it doesn't end up as in another traumatic experience, which again, then you need to go towards the harm reduction. So that is the video for today. What I want to do, make sure that you take that masterclass that I talked about earlier. The link is below the video. I'm going to walk you through that step-by-step process to reduce that social anxiety, to reduce the triggers, to stop your emotional system from getting so dysregulated. And then I'm going to show you how to, when you work that process, you're going to be able to own your worth. And when you own your worth and you have that deep self-esteem, you're going to express yourself fearlessly. And if you're still with me, thank you so much for staying with me until the end. I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope it really connected those dots, those fine details for you on where meditation fits in, even if it fits in at all for you, and to point you towards the deeper issue, which is your emotional system, emotional regulation and emotional dysregulation, working on your triggers, and taking action on what is the fine balance for you. Okay, so here's some other videos you can check out next. Please like and subscribe if you found the video helpful. Here's some videos, other videos you can check out next, and I'll have another video out for you soon, okay? All right, I'll see you later.